The next section we want to build is this recent event section, which has a slider of obviously recent event. And the recent event is being pulled from our CMS. Now, previously in the intermediate module, we worked with the simple native slider that Webflow gives us out of the box. But unfortunately, that doesn't work. We can't pull in CMS data into that because if you remember, it was basically we need to put content into separate slides over there, and we can't. That doesn't work with the CMS. So what can we do? Well, in this case, a lot of people in the Webflow community had this problem and wanted to create really cool sliders that do more than the native Webflow one, and created tons of free clonables. So whenever I have something like this, I basically want to see if somebody created something close enough that I can go ahead and try to reuse it and adapt to my design. So my first step would always be to, go to Google, CMS Slider, Webflow clonable, and then start seeing what we have here and go check them out. And as you can see, top 122 slider Webflow clonables. There's a lot of good free stuff there. My favorite, or the one that I chose for this project, is this project, clonable project from Flow Ninja. And basically this is a project that has a lot of types of basically CMS sliders or interaction. It has a basic slider, thumbnail slider, infinite loop, all kinds of very cool sliders that are pulling from the CMS. In our case, what we need is pretty much the basic slider, right? And you can see how that works. You have here basically a grid and you can start sliding, and they're pulling a list from the CMS. So all we need to do is basically go ahead and change the design of the item. We also have this left and right button, which we don't need because our design doesn't have that. But again, this is something cool that, if you want to, you can use. So let's see how we can actually go ahead and reuse this clonable. So you can go ahead and clone it to your own Webflow account from here. I already did that. Let's basically explore that to understand how it works. First of all, you can see that inside of my Webflow, it looks a little bit different. I can only see one item and I'm not seeing where the other items are. So already kind of like, let's figure out how this works. So let's open up the structure, and you can see that this is the collection, right? Basic swiper. We know that that's the collection because it's purple. So we need to know that they're using classes, and we'll probably need to reuse the exact same classes because there's some custom code here that is targeting them. So we're going to have to use the exact structure and classes that they're using. So they have basic swiper, then they have the swiper wrapper, which has two classes, and then there's the actual slide inside. Okay, let's see if there is some kind of a code here. Let's actually see how they are masking it. Probably the swiper wrapper or the basics. No, I can't see how they're masking it. So it might be done using code. So let's go here and go into the settings of the page to see the code that they are using here. So you can see that they've added some code here, some scripts, and they're loading up something that is called swiper bundle. Okay, so that's probably the swiper code. And again, I don't understand too much code, but I'm trying to see if I can read what's going on here. So I can see here, slides per view 2, slides per group 1, grab cursor true, alley. So I understand what slides per view means, and that's great. That's probably where I adjust how many slides I see. Not sure what the slider groups are. Maybe that's when I swipe, like how big the swipe is, how many, if I have 10 items, is it swiping 4 or 5, or maybe that's that. Grab cursor, that's probably good because that's probably how, we can use the cursor to scroll. Ally, not sure what that is. Space between 10. So that's probably the gap between, each of the cells. Allow touch move true. That's great. And then navigation, right button, left button. And then we can see they even created breakpoints. So you can select a different number of slides per breakpoint, which is great. So that's how we're going to manage the responsiveness. Okay, so looks pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and try to do that. So first of all, I want to structure things correctly. Let's create the section. Let's create the heading that we have here, and then we'll bring in the slider as the second step. So let's start with going into our page wrapper, which already has the empty section, marquee section, and let's bring a new section here before the temp section. And maybe at that point, we won't need the temp section after this one because we already have enough to scroll. So adding a new section, putting it here in place, and I'm going to call this recent event section. All of these sections, by the way, because we have the video in the background, I need to make sure that I'm giving them a black background just so that we don't see what's behind them. So setting this up this way, we want to have a little bit of a top and bottom padding here just to space it out between the different sections before and after. Now, usually we would also have maybe a container or something that gives padding from left and right. in this, and we do have it, you can see here that the heading, the recent event, has some padding from the left and the view all has some padding from the right, but the slider is actually going all the way out. So we'll basically, let's group everything that's going on at the top. We'll call it recent event header and make sure that that has padding. And this one, the slider itself will only have padding from the left side. So recent event, we said we wanted to give it padding from top to bottom. So I'm just holding Alt to do it just symmetrically top to bottom, but not from all sides. So about 70 feels good for me right now. And let's create another div inside to hold the header. So I'm going to call this recent event header. Actually, maybe let's call it header container. Okay, because I can see that I might want to reuse it in this section as well to kind of like give padding from left and right. And so that might be kind of like a class that we'll want to reuse. So instead of giving it a name that is specific for this section, I'm going to give it a name that I can remember to reuse. So let's call this header, or maybe section header contain. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to have, 70 pixels from the left side margin and 70 pixels from the right side. So that's basically the container. This one also has the elements within on the left side and the right side. So this is kind of like a flex space between. This is going to be a different one. So I don't want to set the flex on the header section container, because then I'll have to reuse that, and that's not something that I want to reuse. Let's start off by actually adding I think it's H2. Don't we have a class for H2? Yeah, but I think we gave it an actual class. H2, let's see if we have H2. Yeah, we do have H2. That looks great. So we can call this recent events. And the other thing we want to do is bring in the button. So that is, we didn't create components from these last buttons. So we can go ahead if we want to create a component. Let's call this ghost button. And go home and bring in this ghost button here. Okay, now let's go to the header section and let's give it a class of flex space between. And that's going to arrange them one to the left and one to the right. This one, we also didn't give it properties, so let's make the text something that we can edit. Let's create a property button text, so we can always edit that. And let's go to the link and add this as button link. Okay, now in the settings, we're going to call this button view all, and we haven't created the page yet, so I'm not going to do the link. We'll do this in the final step. Okay, so we've got the header. Now we're ready to get started and copy the slider itself. So I'm heading into the project that I've cloned, and I'm going to basically select the whole CMS basic swiper or slider. I'm going to copy that. And again, I can copy between projects if they're both on my workspace. So you have to clone this to your workspace if you want the copy paste to work. And I'm going to go into my project, and here, not inside of the header, but inside the recent event section, I'm going to paste that. And for pasting cross sites, we had to remove CMS binding, right? Because it doesn't know which CMS collection I want to refer to. So let's go here into the CMS and double click this, and it's asking me where do I want to pull in data from. So in this case, I want to pull in data from the events. So let's do that. That being said, I do know that the events have like 40 or something like that events. I don't want to pull all of them and make like a huge slider. I just want to show the recent event. So under the setting here, let's go into limit and limit items. Let's just show 10 items, okay? Just the most recent icons. Oh, and you can see here, basically, I can actually see where the sliders are. So we're going to have to fix and make sure that we don't have this, overflow on the page. So just the last 10 items. I also want to sort them to make sure that they are the actually recent ones. So let's sort them by date and make sure that it's from newest to oldest. So now I know that we're pulling the right elements. But we're not seeing anything in here. And let's see what we have inside. We have the swiper slide, but you can see that it didn't bring in any content at all. So all of basically the structure that we had here, basic swiper, this thing didn't copy. I just want to test that it's working. So let's add an image inside of this. Let's just add an image and bind that image into the thumbnail from the CMS. I just want to see if it's working. Okay, I can see one image. And let's just publish this and test. Oh, wait, how is it going to work if we didn't copy the actual code? Let's go here into the basic slider. Let's open up the page setting, and let's basically copy all of this. So copy that, go here, go into our home, and not into the head, but into the body, and paste that. Okay, save. Let's see what happens. Let's click publish, because obviously we won't be able to see it inside of our designer. And let's see what happens. Okay, so basically we have something working. We actually have the slider working. It's not designed yet, but it's actually working. It's pulling data from the CMS, right? These are images. Let's see how many we have. 10, of course, should be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we're getting to the end. We can't, for some reason, see the last one here. Okay, so it's working. Now we basically need to design this the right way. How many do we want to basically see in our design? We want to see 3 and a bit. Okay, and we need a little bit less space between them, but let's design the element itself. So this thing needs to be linkable, obviously, because we want, if somebody clicks on this, we want them to go to the actual event page. So we need to create a link block, and then we need to create the image area. And you can see here that we've got this duration and play icon on top of it. That basically means that we'll have to create an element to hold this, some kind of a wrapper, and then maybe we have the background image from the CMS and we align this to the bottom left corner, and then we have this more information here. So let's go ahead and start to first structure one item and then start to figure out the rest of the design. But we want to make sure that the recent event section has an overflow hidden so that we don't have this very long scroll. You can see if it's like this, I can scroll to the right. I want to make sure that I can scroll, so that's okay. I also want to make sure or give the basic swiper here a little bit the same margin from the left. So let's give this 70 from the left, and we can also give this a little bit more margin space between the heading. Okay, so that's the basic structure. Let's see the structure of the actual item here. So I'm going to actually delete this, and let's think about this. So I've mentioned we need to have a div to hold this top information. So let's add a div here. And let's call this event slider. Let's call this image wrapper. Okay. We want to give it some kind of a height, right? We know that the width of this is going to be dynamic based on how many slides we want, but the height, we want to make sure that it's fixed. So let's give this, I don't know, let's try 150 pixels. We'll adjust that a little bit later on. And let's go to the settings and get a background image from the thumb. Okay, let's see how that looks. Can't see anything. Okay. Oh, because it doesn't have a width. So let me do 100% for now. Okay. I can obviously see we need more height here. Let's see what actually is the height of this. Height of this is actually 350. Isn't that too big? Let's try 300. Okay, I think 300 is okay. So we've got the image. Now we want to have the content on top of it. So let's call this duration wrapper. And let's put that inside of the event slider image. So add a div, give it a class of event duration wrapper. Okay, going to give this a little bit of a padding. And inside of it, we need to have this icon. So I'm going to copy this as an SVG, paste the icon inside, confirm. And then let's see it. We can see it here. And then also want to add the text. So this is just going to be a text block that is pulling the duration from the CMS. So we've got that. We want them to be one next to another, not one on top of the other. So let's turn the event duration wrapper into a flex box, turn them one next to each other, give them a little bit of a space between them, make sure that they are centered. I also want the text here to be bigger. And I also want, so number one, this thing does not take up the whole space as it is, you know, as you can see right now. So let's choose actually the parent of this event duration and turn that into a flex box so that we can first of all align it to the bottom left. This is great. And now it's also making sure that it's not taking up the whole space, right? It's basically, as a flex child, it's shrinking. So that's good. That's basically the size we want. Maybe a little bit more padding, maybe from the left and right, I think. Now let's create this glass effect. I think it's something like grayish with transparency. So maybe actually black with a little bit of transparency that also has backdrop filter. So right here from the effects, backdrop filter blur. I think that's working. It's a little bit difficult to see because there's not much content in this image right now, but I think we'll be able to see it. Let's just play a little bit with the opacity of the color. I think that's good. Okay. So we need the arrow to be white and the text to be green. We can set the text to be white if we just change in the event duration wrapper, I think the text from gray to white. Okay, that's fantastic. We can actually make the text a little bit bigger as well, 1.2 rem. That looks good. But this text, we need it to be green. Now remember, I think we created text color green. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got that. Let's preview that to see how we're doing so far. Okay, fantastic. You can see we're pulling in the duration. One problem that we have with the background image is you see we're not seeing the whole image. That's probably because we didn't set the background image here to cover. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go here into this CMS image wrapper. We did select to pull the background image from thumb, but we didn't style it. So let's go here into background and let's add an image. And we're not going to see it, obviously, because it's pulling from the CMS, but we can change the property. So let's set it to cover and let's make sure that it's positioned always in the center. Okay, now you see. Now we're getting somewhere. So let me publish this again and let's see if this looks good. Okay, much better, much better. So we've got this glassy effect working for us. We've got the duration working for us. Okay, we're almost done. Almost done. Looks pretty good. Let's continue with the content below. Let's add these details here. So let's go in and add to our item outside of the image wrapper, just to the CMS slider. Let's add 3 text elements. So I'm just going to do text block and then copy and paste that so that we've got like 3 elements. We want them to be below the image slider. So let's get the swiper slider to be a flex box. It is a flex box, but it's trying to organize the information horizontally. So let's turn it to vertically. That's good. Now they're here. And let's go pull in the information. So the first thing is sport. So what sport is this? So let's get the text from sport. Sport name. Fantastic. The second thing is going to be the event name. So event name. And the third one is the date. So let's pull in the date and we can choose the format. Yeah, December 8th. Okay, fantastic. Okay, let's style this a little bit. The image wrapper, I'm going to add a little bit of a bottom padding to push on this information. Oh, I see that. So here's something that I did that I'm not sure about. I gave the whole slider height of 320, and that's not what I want. I wanted the image to be 320. So let me remove the height for a second and just go to the image wrapper. Okay, so maybe I didn't do this. Maybe it was set up because I see that on the image wrapper, here's the 300 that I set. Okay, so now the slider itself is going to have an automatic height, but the image is 300. Okay, that's what I wanted. Okay, surfing, it has this sport. I remember that we created a class for this, but I don't remember what the class is. Let's check our style guide. Sport type. We called it sport type. All right, let's go here. Let's give this sport type. We also, this one is, I think, event name. We've got that done. And this one, I think we can keep it this way. Now, spacing, maybe I can add a little bit of a gap to the swiper slider so that we have a little bit of a gap, not between the columns, but between the rows here. Okay, I think the spacing actually looks okay. Maybe the image wrapper wants a little bit more space, but overall, I think this looks pretty good. Let's test this out. Let's publish and see it on the published. Okay, fantastic. We've got the information. One thing that I can see is sometimes it's cropping into 2 lines, which is okay. But in that case, I think I want the line height to be a little bit smaller. Okay, so I'm going to fix the line height. And the last thing, I've got 2 more issues here. Number 1 is the issue that I'm not seeing the last element here. I also see that when I have 2 lines of text, you can see that they're not aligning properly because I guess the text is pushing them here. This element is bigger and they're not aligned. I want to make sure that the flex aligns them to the top. I want to make sure that I see the last one here. And then we'll talk about the fact that I want to change how many slides I'm seeing and the space between them. All right, so let's figure out. Let's start with aligning them to the top and arranging the line height here because that's the easy thing. I'm going to go into the event name and just change that from 2.2 to maybe 2.2 maybe. Okay, and let's see the event slider. So the event slider is inside the swiper wrapper, the slider list, which is a flex box, and it aligns them to the center. That's not what I want. I want to align them to the top. Let's see if I can reduce the gap here, if it's going to change the space. I'm not sure, but we can try this. Okay. nice tighter text here, and you can see that even when it's two-line, they're all aligned to the top. So that looks good. Okay, let's try to figure out the last slider. Now, figuring out what pushes it might be tricky because as you can see, what I'm seeing on my screen here is not how it looks here because the spacing between them and all of these things are being rearranged from the code. So let's think about a few things that might be doing this. First of all, let's see what happens if I change the slider width to maybe like 50%, just so that I can better see what's going on. So one thing that I'm thinking about is maybe this gap that I've created here in the list itself, maybe that's adding more spacing on top of the space that they are about to add later on. So maybe I'm just going to remove this gap here. And maybe the way that I'm actually pushing this basic slider, basic swiper, I'm basically giving margin. So I'm basically taking this whole swiper a little bit to the left, and maybe that's also putting it outside of the page. So let me just remove the margin and add padding, because padding is within the box and margin is pushing the whole box. Let's actually try these two things and see if that made any change. Okay, so you can see a space here has been added, and I'm sliding. Okay, fantastic. Now I'm getting into the end of the last one. So we figured that one out. The last thing we want to do is to make sure that we're seeing exactly the same. Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm looking at this. This looks, in general, in our design, we had basically 3 slides. And we do have basically 3 slides here. And the spacing is actually good between them. However, if you look at the kind of like aspect ratio of these, I think now they look great, but on a wider screen, in this case, maybe we actually want 4 slides. Okay, so let me see how I can change the number of this slides. Now, originally, I would go into the code, and we've seen earlier that basically we have here this slides per view, and actually the slides per view here is 6, but I'm not seeing 6. Why doesn't this slides per view actually affect what we're seeing? Basically, I want to set it as 4, but if we're not seeing 6, why does this not work? Now, I've tried to play around with this earlier, and I couldn't figure this out. So what I did was actually went to Twitter and basically wrote down and tagged the people who created this clonable. I said, I'm trying to use Flow Ninja CMS Slider, but changing the slides per view doesn't seem to work. Anybody had this issue? And they came back to me, actually came back to me within like 1 hour, and they basically told me, you know what, don't try to change the properties from here, but change it from the breakpoints. So you can see here that actually, we have here Webflow Desktop, and this is tablet and mobile landscape. So you can see that the Webflow Desktop is actually put for 2.5 with space between of 20. So let's try to change this to 3.5. Let's save this and publish and see if this works. And I think this is just to show you that even when I'm using stuff, I might be stuck and I'm not sure why the code works, especially if you're using other people's work. Now, you can use our community to ask questions and have us try to debug, but it's also a great idea to just ask the people who created it. Sometimes they're not going to answer, but in this case, they really answered super fast. So that was really, really cool. Okay, now you can see that it is affected and we're seeing 3.5, which is great. I think now the proportion, the aspect ratio of the video looks much more like a video. It was a little bit too wide previously. Okay, and with that, I think we've basically finished doing the custom CMS slider. See you in the next video.